Welcome everyone to the Fermentation Association's webinar of Building a Fermented Brand. I'm Amelia Nielsen-Stoll, editor of TFA. We are a trade group that was launched to support producers who use fermentation to create delicious and often healthful food and beverages. Our goals are to help educate consumers about fermentation and its benefits, support scientific research into those health benefits, and work with food safety authorities to establish clearer and more appropriate regulations in regards to fermentation. Today, we bring you two great speakers, Sasha Strauss, Managing Director at Innovation Protocol, and Alex Corsini, founder of Alex's Awesome Sourdough. We have many questions already submitted and reviewed with our speakers. If there are additional topics you'd like to see addressed, please enter them in the chat below and we will try to get to them. I will come back at the end to ask some questions. For now, I will turn it over to you, Alex and Sasha.
Awesome. Thanks, Amelia. And thank you all for joining. This is exciting for all of us. My name is Alex. I'm the founder of Alex's Awesome Sourdough. Essentially, we make frozen sourdough pizza that's not only delicious, but makes you feel great. And we feel that's due to sourdough's gut-friendly fermentation process. I'm also on the advisory board of the TFA, and really happy to be here discussing the do's and don'ts of building a brand in the fermentation space here with Sasha. But enough about me. Let's talk about the guru here. So Sasha has 25 years of brand strategy experience in sectors ranging from leading corporations, philanthropies, faith-based organizations, and academic institutions. Sasha's unique approach on how brands must be constructed and communicated is the foundation of his brand strategy firm, Innovation Protocol, or IP, which has worked with brands such as Nestle, PayPal, Lego, Google, and Disney, and all while running IP as being the managing director. Sasha concurrently teaches brand strategy at UCLA and USC, where actually I went to school. So and it goes on. So that's actually an abridged version of his bio. So Sasha, pleasure.
Thank you so much, Alex. So glad to be here with all of you. As mentioned, the chat is open, so you're welcome to make comments as this dialogue is unfolding. And at the end, we're going to be having a Q&A. And if the Q&A goes over, I'll stick around or we'll have another webinar or whatever the case. So Alex, if you give me the thumbs up, I'll just dive right into my content.
Beautiful. Go for it.
Okay. Hey, fermentation friends. I'm really happy to be with you today because I believe in your category and I believe in your entrepreneurship and I want you to do well. There are things that I'm going to need you to think about and ask yourself about as a business leader. And I hope that I ruffle your feathers a little bit. I hope that it gets a little uncomfortable because I'm really trying to get you to push your business to its maximum potential. But because we're all tired of Zoom and we've been on this screen for a year, and I thought I would do something a little different for you. And so I'm going to use this crazy little contraption I made. My father is a orthopedic surgeon, so bones and muscles and joints. And so these are the tools that he's used to fix people. And he sterilizes them and gives them to me, and I make art and other things with them. But for you today, I specifically made these cards. And I'm just going to use them to run our chat. Here, I'll even zoom in so you can see a little bit better. So I'm not asking you to make anything up. I'm not asking you to put on a crazy clown costume or be inauthentic in your organization's communication. I'm just asking you to synchronize it, to organize it, to make it as consistent and durable as possible. So that way, as a customer or a distributor, I know who you are, I know why you matter, I know what you stand for, I know what your products are capable of. And that clarity, that synchronization, turns out in this era, that's just good business. So I'm going to use this for the framework, but I'm also going to implore you that I can't believe in you, I can't believe in your product if I can't hear you believe in yourself. So whether you're the founder or you're the brand itself like Alex, I really want you to understand that as your buyer, we as your customer, it's not on us to kind of figure you out and find you and come to know you. It's on you to help us learn those things. And so this is a big ask. We can't know you love you, buy from you, or distribute you if we can't hear you believe in yourself? And so this is what I'm going to push hard on today. And the reason why I'm going to push hard on it is because as much as we've talked about COVID, the disease, the thing that I want to discuss is COVID, the economy, which I mean, what COVID did to the economy or what COVID has done permanently to the economy. And so I really want all of us to think about our buyers, our partners, our suppliers, our farmers. And I want us to realize that the economics, the dealings are different now. You can imagine that as everything went remote, we needed to establish new practices, new behaviors, etc. And so this is what I want us to talk about today. I want us to talk about how COVID forced changes in the economy that changed the way that your customers live, changed the way that they shop, changed the way that they buy. And so I just want to show you as an example here. If you used to do things in pretty traditional ways, for example, there's many Europeans attending our session today. News in Europe tended to show up on television and on the web. And now all the news broadcasters in Europe are doing TikTok and Twitter and creating little small pieces of video content, engaging content. They understand that the way that we consume media has changed. And so therefore, these news broadcasters had to adapt the way that they engage their audience. What I'm trying to imply here is that these new behaviors are an opportunity for you. Let me give you an example. When you think about lawyers and bankers and all of these people that we thought that we needed to do business with face-to-face, classically, the ones that succeeded during COVID changed their approach and recognized that, well, maybe most of this can be a digital dialogue. Maybe you can buy that house sight unseen. Maybe you can secure these cucumbers without actually coming to the farm. And I'm not saying I like that better. I'm just pointing it out that it worked. It not only worked, but we saw who won and who lost during COVID. And it was crazy. It wasn't necessarily what you made that defined your success. It was, were you willing to transform how you sell, transform how you partner by being okay doing it remotely? And I don't mean liking it. I just mean accepting it. So as mentioned earlier, I teach in a few different business schools. And there, of course, were my colleague professors who were like, what? We have to teach remotely? I don't do that. I'm all about class participation and engagement. Well, those professors aren't teaching anymore. Whereas those of us who decided that we're going to change to adapt to what it means to converse this way are doing really, really well. So what I'm putting on you is that this remote selling, this remote teaching, this remote telling, this is something that marked those that succeeded during COVID. And I'm going to push you to believe that in the hybrid post-COVID era, it is also what is going to define market leaders. And why is that important? The reason why it's important is because historically, if you were trying to build a consumer packaged goods brand like yours, it was really about your resume, your long list of accomplishments, your heritage in farming, your understanding of the chemistry. And that was what marked the person, the business, the brand. But actually now it's really about how you resonate, how I connect with you, how you inspire me. And that doesn't require a long history. That requires a contemporary participation. And so the reason why I'm pushing this on you is because as we were all locked in our homes for the last year, we kept using social media tools. And not only do we keep using them, but on an exponential scale. More content, more participation, more demographic spread. For example, most of the social media applications did not really think about people who were over 65. They just kind of wrote them off as not necessary parts of that ecosystem. But of course, as COVID has forced everyone to buy things digitally, have things supplied to them remotely, the over 65 marketplace dove right into social media and is now one of the most frequent users of the channel. The only reason why I'm putting this out here for you is that I'm not asking you to be a social media guru. I'm not asking you to post all the time. I'm asking you to acknowledge, in a world where the audience is starting and ending their search digitally, each of the things that you share, post, write about, blog about, video dialogue about, those things are little breadcrumbs that will never go away. They're little trails that lead to your brand, lead to your resourcing, lead to your understanding. And this is powerful. Imagine building a consumer packaged goods brand 20 years ago and how hard it was to reach the audience. Really, think about how hard it was. And now you can join the digital communities. You can find those parents concerned about their baby's guts. You can connect with them directly and not only communicate, but you can leave a breadcrumb trail to your unique value. And the reason why I'm asking you to do this now, the reason why we're having this summit today is because COVID isn't going anywhere yet. As frustrating as that is, I want you to think about it as an opportunity, because the brand building you do right now and for the next 6 months as we work through this crisis, it's going to have an exponential impact on your potential post-COVID. And so this is the pressure I'm putting on you. The action you take today is going to have an extremely high return in the months to come, because we're all stuck, we're all curious, but what we're all, most importantly, we're open. You can acknowledge that what did lockdown do? You cut a lot of people out of your life. As a consumer, you cut a lot of brands out of your life. And it's not that you don't need those relationships, you're just resetting them. And so the question becomes today, how can we connect? How can we engage this audience that's newly curious, that's open to new lifestyles at home, that are looking for new brands that they can believe in, looking for founders that are still connected to their product? Well, powerfully, today, your audience is open to new lifestyles. I intentionally made our talk today dramatic because you'll remember more about what we're learning here today. So all I did just now was kind of set up the situation. I am going to talk about some of the challenges that you and I have to confront, but don't worry, I'm going to end our chat today coming around the corner and talking about the brand solutions that I know you can enact. So let's talk about some of the challenges. The challenge that freaked me out the most is that nobody knew what we were supposed to do. Can you believe it? Not the experts, not the World Health institutions, no one, not the epidemiologists, not the economists, no one, not from any country, not from any organization. We were just all living our fermented lives. And then what happened? COVID struck and paralysis. Everything was put on pause. And the reason why it was so significant and dramatic was because the change was so rapid. It wasn't like we had time. It wasn't like there was a plan in place. We went from living one way. We lived primarily organically, face-to-face, handshake culture, to only digital, only engaging remotely. And that was extremely disruptive, shocking as it was. I want to show you an example of a category that was shocked to its core. That category is healthcare. You might have heard that healthcare doesn't like to innovate. Healthcare likes to move slowly and cautiously because it's scared of lawsuits and insurance. Well, interestingly enough, we have quite a few clients in the healthcare sector, and they had something that they proudly called in 2020, 2019, 2020, had something they called our 7-year innovation plan. 7-year innovation plan, where we're going to be able to do these things and engage audiences in these ways. Well, what was a 7-year plan became a 30-day emergency implementation strategy, where these hospital systems and healthcare providers decided, okay, telehealth, we're in. I don't care where the patient is. I don't care where the physician is. They're going to be able to digitally connect. Remote patient records, you know the difference. You understand the change. That was a significant pivot, and it cost healthcare greatly. Well, what I want you to know, as someone who serves a whole range of categories, you're not alone. They're not alone. We're all struggling through this. And that's why it's extremely exhausting. Being an owner operator right now, like you, I'm exhausted. Managing my talent remotely, managing my suppliers remotely. I'm a new kind of exhausted, and this isn't just Sasha's opinion. Scientists are proving that Zooming all day and being isolated all day, it's wearing on us. It's affecting us. It's traumatizing us. The only light in the tunnel, the only thing that I'm going to bring out here is that there's something kind of interesting happening in the world. I mentioned my father is an orthopedic surgeon. He was in the US Navy. And so we traveled the world as part of our work every single day. And I used to believe that I was an international citizen, an internationalist. I see all of you dialing in from these amazing places that I've been, and I love it. And I can't wait to come back. But, you know, were you and I the same? Were you and I seeing the world the same way? No. I mean, it depended on who governed us, depended on what gods and goddesses we prayed to. So were we all the same ever in the past? Not really. But in an uber connected world where we're all connected to the internet and sharing our stories every day, and that we all suffered the same trauma, we all have friends and family affected by COVID, lifestyles ruined by it, governments wrecked by it, economies destroyed by it. This is the first time in the history of the world that all of us, every one of us, is enduring the same trauma. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it has unlocked whole new sensitivities, whole new curiosities, opennesses to new ways of preparing food, eating food, engaging in food. We're aware of people in other countries and their practices, and we're socializing around it. And so I actually think that this is kind of an opportunity for you. So much of your practice, so much of the way you build and innovate product comes from incredible lifestyles the world over. Well, for the first time, everyone in your audience has suffered the same trauma and probably has the same emotional openness. And so I want to talk about the opportunity before you. Remember, I'm doing this dramatically on purpose. I don't want you to be bored. So I talked about the situation that we're in. We've all been driven to be remote. We can connect and engage remotely. We can do well despite the lockdowns. But of course, there are challenges. This is so hard, a new kind of exhausting. It's hard to manage our talent. We can't transform that quickly. Well, let's talk about the opportunities. And I don't think that the opportunities are going to be obvious to you, but once I talk about them, I think you're going to be totally on board. And not only totally on board, but I think that you can acknowledge that there's kind of like a social reboot going on. We're all reframing how we engage our faith communities, how we pray. I'll give you an example for the nonprofits that I serve. 10% of our clients are nonprofits. And it was amazing. In order to have a nonprofit board meeting, I mean, how hard? It was so hard to get all those people to travel in and come to this meeting and feed them. Our nonprofits are thriving. It's amazing. Why? Because more people can participate. There's more board participation. There's more lay leader participation. And that is because we've kind of rebooted what we expect of a board meeting, rebooted what we expect of getting people to participate. I'm so glad Anna and her nonprofit is curious about this. I promise that it's a really interesting new frontier in the nonprofit world. So what I'm going to push on you is there's this reboot happening. Don't wait and see. Don't hope that the traditional market brands teach you how to adapt and thrive in this category. I'm actually pushing you to think and do, to think forward, to adapt how you brand your product, communicate your product, engage your workforce, engage your partners in a contemporary and fresh way. Just as a point of reference, and as everyone who introduced me mentioned, I'm coming from a point of view. I only do brand strategy. It's all I ever do. In 2006, I started a brand strategy consulting firm. I run a coworker force of 25 people. I teach this topic in business schools and give speeches about it at conferences and summits. So I'm coming at this from some core fundamentals, and you probably already know the fundamentals. The fundamentals are pretty obvious. We make a lot of things. We sell them in lots of places. There's lots of inputs, lots of outputs, lots of health details. And because those things are all nuanced and unique, it's very hard for our customer or our retailer to understand those things. And so what a brand strategy does is it drives common conversation, common language through how we partner, through how we use technology, through how we build products and services, so that as you hear from me and engage me over time, you're more familiar, you trust me more, you're more interested in what it is that I do. But the reason why this is a contemporary challenge is because communication has transformed. Like, for example, you probably recall the notion of advertising. Advertising was traditionally how you introduced yourself to a new market. So you've got a new kimchi product. You had to, pester people. You had to put ads out and say, hey, I've got a kimchi product. It's really interesting. And, only 1 out of 1,000 people would say, oh my gosh, I'm interested. Tell me more. And traditionally, you move from advertising to what was marketing, the explanation phase. And this is where your website or a brochure or a pamphlet or the back of the label added more context, more explanation, more words, more pictures, more understanding. Okay, so you went from introducing your product to your market to explaining it to them. Eventually, they decide to retail it. They decide that they want to work for you, or they want to invest in you, or they want to be a customer. And that audience, that public, you used to call it public relations. You used to stay in relationship with your public. But what's so different now is that as you introduce yourself, explain yourself, or engage your audience after the fact, this is a confluence. This is a flow from paid, you're paying to get them to pay attention, to now you've earned their attention. And now they're the ones relaying your message, telling friends and family about where they work or who they buy from. And in order to master this domain, you kind of need to have a whole new way of thinking about your communications and your brand strategy. And it's going to ask 3 things of you. This is a silly notion, the trifecta effect. It doesn't really mean anything. Just try these 3 actions on. I'll walk you through them and I'll give you example behaviors. So the first thing that's super important in a post-COVID era is it used to be that a brand could do well, could make money, and that was fine. We weren't ashamed that it filled the shelf. We were like, oh, must be a good product, must be doing well. In a post-COVID era, we are not accepting that. We want a brand to also do good. And as cheesy as that might have sounded in 2015, when we were talking about it as corporate social responsibility, in a post-COVID world, we want to buy from businesses that are conscious, that are aware, that are paying attention to their farmers, paying attention to the soil, paying attention to the distribution lines. They're aware because we as citizens are paying attention and want to know. And so the first action that I'll close out my talk on later is particularly about working like an impactor. Don't just work like a seller. Don't just work like a product maker. Also understand that I have to make an impact. I have to somehow do good for the world while I build my business and create profit. Now, what's interesting is that because the category has transformed, how buyers buy, how retailers retail, how consumers consume has transformed, guess what? The old ways of making product are old. They don't relate to the way that people buy and engage brands today. And so what's super cool is you get to enterprise like a maker. Change, think in advanced ways about how you build your category, grow the market's presence. And so what's super cool about this is a lot of you are competing against pretty established suppliers, businesses that have been adjacent or around your category for a century. And guess what? They don't want to change anything. They want to stay the course that they've already been on. And what I want to put on all of you as innovators, as inspired founders, is guess what? The market works differently now, and you get to be the transformer. You get to be the one who enterprises like a creator, like a maker, and that's going to gain far more engagement and following. The third ask of you is to stop waking up every day, looking at your toes and saying, how am I going to move product? I've been there with you. I know what that feels like. And I'll tell you, it's hard to know what day it is. And I want to help elevate your eyes. I want to help you lift up your head and see beyond today and look at tomorrow as the destination. And that's going to require you to think strategically. That's why this is a conversation about brand strategy, not just branding. So let's talk about the strategic actions you can take to build your brand in this new normal. So first and foremost, I don't understand. I don't understand fermentation. I don't understand the health benefits. I don't understand its cultural origins. I don't understand what section to buy it in. I don't understand what to eat it with or who to serve it to. And so your first duty as a brand is to help me make sense of this. Help me understand it. Now, colloquially, we could call this teach, don't sell. But I want to help you see that it's not your job to be the sexiest, the raciest, the most innovative. It's your job to help me understand. And where understanding sits in the consumer's mind is where buying behaviors originate. So the first and most important duty of your brand is to simply help me not feel alone, help me not feel confused, help me not feel overwhelmed. But by talking about the science in social, communal terms, by talking about the process and the farming in ways that I, a non-farmer, can understand, that helping me make sense is something that your large competitors will never do. Another thing that you can do along with helping me make sense is include everyone. Truly include everyone. And I say include everyone, I don't just mean by color of skin or social lifestyle. I mean by shape of body. I mean of ability or not ability. And that inclusion is not only kindness, it's not only warmth, it's good for business. It invites more people to the table to be included in your brand story. And this is exactly what your customers want to see from you anyway. That inclusion says all are welcome to participate in this lifestyle. If you can include everyone, you're going to create the most powerful thing a brand can do, which is make people not only not feel alone, but create common moments. If I'm cooking with your product or building dinner for my family with your ingredients, and I share that and other people see it on my Facebook and they click like on it and build community around it, this is the most powerful thing a brand can do. By creating these common moments where my family doesn't look like your family, but we're still being families around these fermented foods, wow, that common connection, that common moment, that connection is so powerful. It's more powerful than any marketing campaign, any social advertising. Nothing can do the work like this. And the reason why this is so important is because it will drive your community to contribute. Now, classically, for those of you who are marketers, you know that we've always known that word of mouth is the most powerful marketing there is. The idea that no matter how much you spend on television, on the radio, and social media, no matter how much you spend, it is nowhere near as powerful as someone advocating for you, a customer, a retailer advocating for you. Well, what does that look like in 2021? That looks like your community reposting your articles, reposting your recipes, taking photographs, sharing, connecting, and socializing. And by including everyone, by creating common moments, by helping me make sense, I'm going to contribute. I'm going to share and endorse and thumbs up and heart all the things that you produce. And that is going to create community dialogue, which again is the most powerful marketing there is. Just a couple more cards and then we'll wrap up and take your really amazing questions. Thank you all for registering for this. For 110 questions were submitted. And so Alex is going to help facilitate a conversation against those questions in just a moment. But I want to give you two more incredibly important actions in building your brand in this new normal. For those of you who are not from North America, this assertion of thought leadership may seem foreign to you, but I want to tell you how important it is. Thought leadership does not mean that you invent new knowledge. Thought leadership means that you simply share relevant knowledge, that you share information, that you teach people about this information. You may, in fact, be teaching your competitors about things. But what's so special about being a thought leader or facilitating thought leadership is that no one can judge you for it. And that's why when you see a lot of your competitors and classic food purveyors teaching recipes, no one ever thought anything of it. Well, because they were selling, but they were educating while they sell. And so by educating, by inspiring people to learn, they will be indelibly connected to you. They will prefer you. They won't wonder if your price is a penny cheaper. They'll prefer you because you're who they learned from. We buy from who we learn from. And that power never goes away. But the last ask I have for you is no matter how pure your ingredients, no matter how kind your founder, we want businesses that have pro-social actions. Now, corporate terms, CSR, corporate social responsibility, whatever those words might be, I want you to acknowledge what I mentioned earlier. We want brands to do well by doing good. And so you have to ask yourself where your do good action is. And what I want to say to you is, I do not want you to donate any money. I don't want you to lift heavy boxes. I don't want you to hammer nails building homes, because you are not an expert at that. You are an expert at your product, the category, and the lifestyle around it. And so your pro-social, your community service, your action has to be around your core competency, what you are a specialist at. Let me give you an example. I mentioned earlier that our firm serves nonprofits. 10% of our clients are nonprofits. Well, I've got an able-bodied, capable workforce of 25 young people. Why are we not building homeless shelters? Because we're not experts at building homeless shelters. We help brand the nonprofits building homeless shelters. We help brand the parties making contributions to society. You can do the same. You can help bring product and education to the communities that need this, that need to advance and support their citizens. And so this pro-social behavior may have been a nice to have in the old day of business. In the pro-social post-COVID world, we're going to demand it. So what I want you to do is take those actions that we just went over, take a grappling hook with a long rope and swing it over your head, grab 2022 and pull it towards you, and work towards a well-defined post-COVID brand designed with these key actions in mind. Don't forget, what are you doing for the world? Don't forget how you're advancing my learnings and understandings. Don't forget how you've engaged the community and gotten them to participate. Don't forget how you've created common moments for your community to connect and love each other. Don't forget to include everyone, please. And don't forget, all you have to do is help me understand. Because if you help me understand, I prefer you. Thank you for listening. I know that was quick, but we only had a little bit of time and we wanted to save time for your really awesome questions. Please, Alex, if you will.
Thanks, Sasha. Lots of great learnings there. And yeah, thank you all for listening. So I have some questions myself just from listening and tuning in. Definitely sparked my interest. And then as well, I pulled some questions from all the registrants out there. There were hundreds of fabulous questions. I did my best to distill it down to a few. So please bear with me here. But, I think to start out, a good topic area would just be related to the help me make sense slide.
Okay.
And just kind of thinking about how do you go about educating and teaching consumers a new concept. And to give you and to preface that, I faced this myself, as I alluded to earlier, we were the first sourdough pizza brand on the market. And we were basically essentially trying to tell consumers that sourdough is not only a flavor profile, that it's actually a traditional fermentation process that's unique, and there are health benefits associated with this traditional technique, right? And the question is, okay, how do you really go out there and make an impact and not spend, millions of dollars educating when, in fact, a lot of entrepreneurs that are joining this call, have a tight budget just like I do. So that's kind of, I think that'd be a good place to start. Just, how do you go about educating a new product?
So let's talk about that, and let's be conservative with our spend. I don't want anyone to believe that you need to be a wealthy business to do this right. And so let's take Alex's core product as the conversation starter here. We're talking about pizza dough. And what's crazy about pizza dough is that it never lives alone. It is always adjacent to other things, ingredients, tomato sauce, or no tomato sauce, depending on where you come from. And so my answer to Alex's question about how you build a new brand, a startup brand, in a category that may need a little bit of transformation, and my answer is strategic partnerships. So that tomato sauce brand, that cheese brand, that ingredient brand, they're already in market having social dialogue. And so by joining up with them, by co-marketing together, building a conversation together, a video together, where it just so happens that your sourdough crust is incorporated in that discussion, that's the best kind of growth a startup can build, is the kind where it's not going at it alone, trying to reframe an entire category. You're going with adjacent non-competitive partners to help transform the dialogue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. And that was actually a core kind of strategy for us as well. Right. We partnered with a cheese provider. We partnered with a tomato provider. They give you help in marketing and distribution as well. So I really do encourage entrepreneurs out there, whether it's, a kimchi business or, look at like the chili provider, look at all your vegetable providers, see if they can help you. Maybe the stores that they do really well and you'll do really well in. And then you can even maybe in-store market together, create a shelf tag, and yeah, so I totally agree with you on that.
I'll give you a fun example, Alex. So I have a friend who used to run Dole canned fruit. So you know what that product is, you know what it looks like, etc. Well, there was only so much growth they could drive by talking about Dole canned fruit. So what do? They contacted a dairy company that made cottage cheese and said, can we co-pack? Can we co-market? Can we have a shelf tag together? And of course, it drove up both categories and created a new lifestyle where healthy livers, people who are living a healthy life, are like, oh, I can have my fruit with my cottage cheese. I can get my complete set of nutrients. And so that's just an example. And I love that you're already doing that, Alex. Perfect.
Awesome. And something kind of aligned with that is, and this was a common question and theme was, when you're building a fermented brand, what are the key items to call out and what not to call out? And I know this isn't kind of your specific area of expertise. So if you want to kind of maybe extrapolate, but, specifically they were saying, do we want to focus on raw? Do we want to focus on probiotic? Do we want to focus on live cultures? And then one other part to that question is less more.
Okay, great. So first, I hope that your audience doesn't just hear from you once. And so just remind yourself that as you're building out your messaging, it's not supposed to be a one-stop learn everything experience. Hopefully they're following on your Instagram. Hopefully they're also watching a video. Hopefully they're also seeing your ad in the local paper. And so you're going to have multiple opportunities to touch and engage them. Okay. That's the first thing I want to put out there is don't try to cram all your value into a single channel. Second thing that's super important is if I look at all of you from tempeh to kefir to pickles to spirits to mead, this is about the joy of eating. And so when you over science me and you over gut me, I forget the joy of eating. Totally. And so just remind yourself that your most important message is how pleasant, how tasty, how engaging, how awesome, how good my gut feels. That's the pleasure of eating. And then you can tell me how you make that pleasure because we use these ingredients, because we source these ingredients. That's why it's so pleasant. And so just help yourself not get stuck in the scientific nuance of how you make your products. You're all nerdy specialists. You're like totally in it. Look, you're all part of a club. You guys are like joined a fermentation club. That's how connected to the topic you are. Remind yourself that your average customer, your mass market customer is not hanging out with fermenters. And so your job is really to get them inspired and interested in a general level. And then through exposure over time, educate and inspire them with learning. Totally agree. Yeah, we started out heavy on the science, heavy on the process, talking about, how long we ferment, et cetera, science behind the culture. And our customer didn't really respond to that. They wanted to really understand the benefit. So you can lead with, and that's something I see in fermentation all too often is people aren't selling the actual benefit of the, if you're selling kombucha, what are you actually selling? Are you selling the scientific process? Or are you selling a feel-good product, right? That might make you feel better than a soda or something of that nature. So that's, and the other thing is definitely don't boil the ocean is another suggestion I would have. You can, so to the less is more question, I would say that you obviously want a comprehensive and succinct story, but you also, and with that said, you can't be too busy, right? The consumer doesn't have the capacity. Your package is too small. There's like all these facts. The retailer has only so much store shelf. So I know that there's a lot to love and learn, but that's what the second, third, fourth, 10th engagement is for.
Totally.
That's what your website, that's why I'm going to spend time on your website, is to learn those deep nuances.
Totally agree. And that's something that we're actually just learning right now is just having a more multi-channel approach, because, you don't want to have like too much science or obviously any kind of health claim on the package itself, but then on the website, you can kind of, have an added layer of specificity or something of that nature. And then your Instagram, and you could cross-reference.
Totally.
So
beautiful. Actually, let me give you a non-fermentation example just for all of our participants here today. So a client that is an international business is called PayPal. And it's so interesting. When we started working with PayPal, they kept saying, secure, safe and secure, safe and secure. That was the engineering science. They were like, well, what did we find out from the consumer? Oh, I didn't realize I should be scared. Ooh, I'm concerned about being unsafe. Where when we figured out that if we made safe and secure the second, the third, or the fourth thing that we brought up, there was far more interest, far more engagement. So I'm not saying delete the science, just don't make it the marquee.
Totally. That makes sense. I mean, a lot of it actually has to come down to the overall brand strategy and actual mission of the business too, right? So, I mean, you have kombucha companies that want to go into 7-Eleven, right? That customer is very different from the small regional customer. So if you want to target me, you want to be like, I'm just going to pull out a brand that I love locally, Wild West Ferments. They ferment in ceramic, right? So it's, to me, that resonates, but maybe that doesn't resonate to the mass market 7-Eleven customer. So first think about the addressable market, where you're actually heading and what kind of brand you want to build, right? I mean, and then kind of think of the facets in the language that's going to appeal to that customer. So
beautiful, Alex. When I think about your business, it could have been super niche, like, no, it's only for these people who care about sourdough. But I actually think that would be a shame. It would be a shame because there's so many people not enjoying pizza because of the digestive repercussions. And so I think, Alex, you probably dream of your product being everywhere for everyone, and you don't feel weird about that. You don't say, no, I want to be a subculture. No, you want as many people to enjoy pizza as possible, and your product happens to be the vehicle.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I agree with you. Is there anything to be said about iterating on brand strategy? Because I think, one thing when I talk to aspiring entrepreneurs, they start overthinking, I think, the marketing piece. And I'm always like, have you sold anything yet? Have you actually gone out in the marketplace yet? And I mean that in the kindest way, because, jokingly, we changed our business name 3 times in 2 years. And I'm not advising that by any means, but, you got to listen to the market and iterate. So I guess, is there anything that you wanted to add on top of that?
Yes. So you're not alone, Alex. And I want you to know that the world's biggest companies, my clients that are Fortune 10s, also have the same problem. So you're not alone, and it's just part of being someone who loves their product. But what is important is that every time you change, not only do you need to reset, but so do your distributors, so do your retailers, so do their sales staff, those poor people. Think about it. I mean, they're just trying to live their lives every day. And you're like, oh, by the way, I've got a whole new message. And so I just want us to all be a little sympathetic here and acknowledge that every time you reboot, you're basically shuffling the cards on your core partners. And so I would say you are allowed to iterate. Iterate in small amounts. Iterate with strategic intention. Don't just constantly change the product because you feel like you need to. And the thing I would say to all the founders dialed in today, you're not the customer. You're not the customer. And I know you want to build something that you love and that you want to wear on your chest, but I'll tell you, it is not about you. So never use the I in making a decision. Like, I want, I believe. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about all the individuals, all the lives that you have the chance to impact. What do they need to see? What do they need to understand? And focus all your communication energy on them.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Yeah. And then the other thing is like thinking about secondary and tertiary consequences of something. And one interesting thing is, maybe you bring your product back and you won the mom that bought your sauerkraut. And then you want her to be able to articulate why she bought it to her family as well.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then, so yeah, it's interesting to think about that piece of it. One other point, let's see, another question to pull up here is, one I thought that was really interesting is, how does customer engagement tie into brand strategy, especially given that we're in a more remote world, as as a big theme of your presentation. But how do you think about, interacting with the distributors, as you were talking to, interacting with all of your customers, wide ranging, maybe even an unhappy customer.
Yes.
How does that all tie into brand strategy?
So brand strategy is a business plan. It's a plan to build advocacy, grow that advocacy. You want customers to be proud of who they buy from. You want retailers to be proud of what they sell. And that is a long game plan. So I just want everyone to really see and understand that this is about years of impact, not quarterly sales. Okay. And so what's super important about your business plan is that you're constantly thinking about how to keep the audience engaged over time. I'm the kind of person who buys a jar of pickles and eats them in a weekend. Okay. But other people might buy them only every 2 months. And so does that mean that you only get to engage that audience in the store once every 2 months? That's not long-term commitment. That's not a relationship over time. And so what eventually you have to figure out is, where do I get to sustain the relationship without selling someone a product? And that's where recipes and interviews and dialogues and blog posts and Instagram showcases fill in the gap between purchased and repurchase. And so that's what I want all of us to be thinking about. How frequently does my audience need to buy my product? And what can I do to fill the gap in between with engagement that is not product?
Got it. That makes sense. And also, is there something to be said about like making sure that you streamline your messaging? Like, for instance, once we started really owning the word awesome in our name,
yes,
we found that our team started using it when we email or when we talk to customers, and then our buyers were actually starting to use the word awesome describing our product. So, it's this thing where you want the packaging to be related to the website, to be related to how you articulate it to anybody, right?
Yeah. And honestly, Alex, we can see it in your smile here. That felt really good that they were using your language. Now, if every time I heard from Alex, it was radical and bodacious and all these different words, then there wouldn't be that common language. And then you wouldn't have all your parties referencing you in the same way. And so what's most important is that your brand is consistent over time. That's what good branding is. Consistency over time. And so, yes, picking a through line, picking a word or a phrase and making that a regular part of what you say and do will help people remember and differentiate. I'll give you an example with our business. My competitors, all of their firms, their names have the word branding in it. So for example, there's a firm called Interbrand. There's a firm called Future Brand. All these, okay? So when I was naming my business, I wanted to talk about a lifestyle, a process, a way of building brand answers. And so we named the business Innovation Protocol, the protocol for brands that innovate, the protocol for brands that innovate. And so what do all of our clients talk about? They talk about our protocol. They talk about being an innovator. And so when they're introducing themselves, when they're doing branding work and they're showcasing the work, they celebrate following a protocol and they celebrate being an innovator. Boom, I'm done. No more marketing language. I don't want them to talk about anything else. Those two things are compelling enough. And that durable voice has helped me sustain strong market share for 15 straight years.
Interesting. Yeah. And it's because you have a very succinct and differentiated message, right?
Yep.
So yeah, sometimes people just call us the awesome pizza. They don't, maybe we're not even the sourdough pizza. It's like we're the awesome pizza, right? And
inevitably you might have a product that isn't sourdough. It's fermented rye or some other version of the solution, right? And that will give you the chance to expand your product portfolio. If they know Alex and awesome, and by the way, the A's really help there, that alliteration there, help a lot. Then you get to expand your product line and be the awesome solution provider that has all of these amazing breads.
Well, I love that note because it transitions into the last question that I have, and I know we're pretty short on time here, so I think Amelia is going to jump in soon. But the last question I had was around line extensions and new SKUs, and kind of when to consider growing your brand platform and portfolio, kind of really how to execute that.
So the best thing to do is study the market and see what brands offer multiple solutions. And I don't mean just fermented brands, just retail present brands. Now, what they'll do is what you'll see is called brand architecture. And let me give you the catchphrase for this idea. I want to make my products easy to buy and easy to sell. Now, in order to make them easy to buy, they have to be organized and clear. And in order for a retail clerk to sell them, they have to be organized and clear. And so what brand strategy helps you do is first elevate what is our master brand message? What is our core value that we are going to communicate across anything? And then how does that break down into individual products? So the most obvious example of this might be Coca-Cola, where they've got Coca-Cola, and then they've got Diet Coke, and then Coca Light, and Cherry Coke. And what has that done? That's helped individual markets get what they want, but they know who it's coming from. And that architecture builds durability. It helps you protect your market presence.
Interesting. Yeah, one piece of advice that is somewhat maybe a little tangential, but when I was thinking about new SKUs is you don't want too many degrees of weird as well, especially in the fermentation space. This is something I highly recommend. You know, we had all these crazy pizza topping ideas. You know, you start with cheese, you maybe add some mushrooms. You know, you don't want to go do a crazy, you don't want to go out on a limb and start using different grains, and it causes confusion, right? So I highly recommend just sticking to core items, and then, you know, kind of thinking about how, you know, new SKUs are going to really tie into they're all going to be correlated very closely, right?
Yes, exactly. That simplicity, that correlation, that ease of access. And like you just mentioned with your obscure recipes, the consumer's going to walk into the store. They're going to be seeking your product. Well, don't tell them to go buy something that isn't in that store. Bring up toppings that they also will have access to, because then they will deliver on your vision. Then they will execute your recipe. They're not going to feel paralyzed because they don't have that unique herb from that unique place.
Awesome. Well, Amelia's back here, so.
Okay, are we going to take some audience questions?
Yes. Are you ready for some other questions?
Let's do it. Alex asked me some great ones.
Yes. First, thank you so much, Sasha. This was just a really dynamic presentation, and I think you've given our audience some really important takeaways that they can help to build their brand or launch their brand. We have a lot of new fermented brands here with us today too, and thrive in this current retail climate. First, we had a few questions. People want to know, you know, they loved the information you gave. Do you have examples of brands who are doing this really well, who are able to keep thriving in the, you know, post-COVID, current COVID world?
Oh my gosh. I have, right now I have 70 students that are in my MBA class at USC, and each one of them picked a brand and studied how they were behaving in COVID. And I'm here to say, in shoe manufacturing, in automobile distribution, in telecommunications, in enterprise software, yes, there are tons of examples of organizations who have smartened up to this reality. So all I would say to all of our registrants today is look with an open mind, look for parties who are awoken to these truths, and you will see there is an example in every sector, no question.
And there's certainly not one answer as well. Like in the food space, you could look at, obviously e-com became huge. So you see even alcoholic beverage manufacturers having huge business on e-com. You have pizza, you know, we didn't actually go on e-com, but, you know, we have, you know, friends and competitors that started shipping their pizzas online and doing extremely well. But like I said, there's many different solutions. We decided to double down in retail. And then we just changed our promotion strategy around not being able to sample, but we created an in-home sampling program around our target demographic with mothers. So we targeted mom ambassadors around the country, sent them pizzas at home, and they had socially distanced parties. And that was our way of driving trial. So I think that, you know, you just have to think on your feet. And I think there's many ways to skin the cat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a great idea. Okay, we had another question, Sasha. Someone asked, can you expand on resume moving to resonance? I have just completed a startup food business course. They talked about sharing your story and how important that is. Can you expand a little bit on it?
Wonderful, wonderful. So that's a great example. And I'm so glad that Gerard brought that up. So classically, we all think about the brands that our parents chose, and it was always about the heritage, founded in, XYZ century. And we thought that that meant expert. We thought that that meant good business. We thought that that meant good leadership. But now that social media has just blown open the truths, and we're seeing these large manufacturers do terrible things and mistreat their employees and mistreat their suppliers, we're all, as I mentioned earlier, open to buy from new brands. We're all kind of curious. And so what matters now is who's showing up best, who's the most engaged in this channel, who is most inspired to participate today. Because those classic brands, remember, they love the way that it was. They liked all their dominance and control. So the resume history has now transformed to who most resonates, who's most engaged in this digital conversation, who's most participating online, who's got the most interesting Instagram feed. That kind of resonance is building dominating brands that had no market presence before, but are now the choice of customers today.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a question. I mean, quite a few fermented products do include sugar, but today, we have such a sugar averse society. Give me some tips. How would you go about marketing a product to people that may be nervous about sugar?
Yes. So by the way, that sugar fear is actually a very North American philosophy. Yes, just kind of take note here that America has a loud voice, so we tend to think that cultural behaviors here are international, but sugar is relative, and not only sugar is relative, but sugar is one of the most valuable things in the world, like salt. So there's a place for it. And not only is there a place for it, but minimal amounts of sugar show up in virtually everything from our toothpaste to the natural fruit we eat. And so what's really important to help people understand is that this is not candy. We are not sugarifying. We're using it as a catalyst or an ingredient to create a certain flavor balance. And by helping them understand that this is not a sweet product, sugar is an ingredient to help unlock a certain taste profile, then they give you permission to have sugar. And the best example of this is in children's foods, where when you're buying baby food for your child, they don't say 0 sugar, because then we know that there's 0 taste. They talk about there being just enough of the right ingredients so your child will eat it and be healthy. And so don't run from certain ingredients. Find the happy medium to include them, but without over celebrating them.
It's a great answer. Yeah, I was also going to just say you could play on the word sweet instead of sugar and say, not very sweet or less sweet or something of that nature.
Yep. And remember, corn syrup and these manipulated sugars, that's the destructive stuff. But pure sugars, cane sugars, fruit sugars, naturally extracted, that stuff is actually in small doses fine or good. So.
Yeah, I'm pro sugar. So.
And by the way, I think that someone like Tatiana might disagree that no, sugar is bad and sugar shouldn't be included. But I want to ring this bell again. There's a small community of people who is fervent about no sugar in their foods, but everyone else is okay with it to a certain degree. So you can either build for the nuanced niche market that will always be limited in scope, or you can include everyone in the dialogue and allow sugar a place, not prominence.
Sasha, your point on being, socially aware, socially relevant brands was so important. We had quite a few people ask about how they can be more mindful of that, given the cultural history of a lot of fermented foods. Let me read you one of these questions.
Please.
They asked, how do you think brands, especially brands owned by white people, should consider cultural appropriation and representation within their fermented brand, and for products that have roots in, marginalized communities and cultures?
Well, I guess I would have to look at other food categories, sushi or Mexican food or Thai food or German sausages and ask, am I constantly focusing on its origin? Am I constantly focusing on, oh, I'm eating this sushi, this is cultural appropriation from Japan? Not necessarily. I'm not thinking about that as the first factor that helps me decide whether I want to choose this product or not. I think we have a very, very important dialogue happening in the world right now where every culture, every community deserves its origin story. But I don't think that the number one thing you need to be talking about is the culture origin. The culture origin can be an educational piece, a celebration, a reference. Your images on your website can talk about where these recipes were practiced and passed down through generations. That's awesome. But the label, your out front communication, just like on sushi and Mexican food, it's not necessarily talking about founder origin from a century ago, this group of people who these recipes were taken from. It's talking about how we are living and practicing these cultures today because these foods introduce us to them. That's what's inspiring about this, is that I wouldn't even have known about the cultural appropriation, but these brands are helping me understand the cultures that these things came from. And I love the brand for it. I love them for educating and inspiring.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I always think of food as inclusion as well. Like, you know, if I have friends over for dinner, you know, cook them like an Indian dish and teach them about the origins of that dish. If anything, that, you mean, one time I had kimchi that was so good, it made me want to travel to Korea, you know? And it's like, for me, food is if anything, it's bringing people together.
It's a gateway to culture. It's a good gateway to understanding and interest. And that's the best part, is that it's not a stealing of origin practice. It's a igniting and celebrating of these origin practices and giving them light where they wouldn't have it otherwise.
Agreed.
Thank you. Great thoughts on that. All right. I know we're over on time. My last question. We had a question come through. This is someone who produces an authentic coconut milk kefir. They said our national broker distributors are not comfortable with us communicating directly with our 600 plus retailers across Canada. Do you have any thoughts on who owns the retailer?
Wow, that's a little monopolistic. I'm surprised to hear that. So let me just tell you about the tactic that good brands use to get around that. They're not educating the retailer, they're inspiring the clerk. How do you inspire the clerk? You offer classes, online sessions, bonuses, credits, learning gifts and things, free product samples, so that they're socially familiar. And that seems to be acceptable. That's where the distributors kind of don't have a hand. They own the retail relationship, but they don't own the retail clerk relationship. And so what we've seen do really, really well is, for example, a series of video modules where if the retail clerk watches these 5 30-second videos, they unlock free products sent to their home or unlock a t-shirt or a mug. And it's kind of interesting to see because, you know, the clerk wants to feel informed. The clerk wants to feel savvy. The clerk loves a free t-shirt. And so it's a way of getting around the distributor's dominance and focusing on the person who's actually talking to your buyer.
Oh, that is great advice. All right. We wanted to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. Also, thank you so much to Sasha and Alex. We will post a recording on TFA's website in the next 24 hours. We also have a number of great webinars coming up in the next few weeks, including a yeast primer, measuring and monitoring fermented food microbes, and advances in yeast. Please go to fermentationassociation.org to check these out and register. And while you're there, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Sasha and Alex.
Thank you.
It's been a great discussion.
Thank you, everyone listening.
Friends, be in touch.
All right. Take care.
All right.